With every passing month, Ireland's problems seem to be getting worse and worse. And the main problem, I would say, that's impacting most people most significantly is housing. And to say that Ireland had a housing crisis would have been no understatement, but now the word disaster is being used by more and more commentators that are involved with homelessness, provision of services within Ireland itself. I want to have a look this morning at what the figures are, the most recent figures. I want to look at what's being said, how the government are being challenged again to combat this issue. And they're great at talking. They're great at talking. They talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. And as every month passes by, and you'll see from one of the graphs in this particular clip that I'm putting together, it's very sobering when you see the trajectory that homelessness is going on in Ireland at the minute. So we'll kick off with a quick video clip. This is Senator Sharon Keoghan. She was talking about all the a lot of contributory factors to do with this crisis that's happening at the minute, and she's pretty direct in what she says.
So here, look, I want to address one of the most pressing issues in our country today, housing. More importantly, I propose a solution. The debate on housing has been highly unproductive. It has followed a false binary where some advocate for deregulation and the reliance on the market, while others believe that the state can build infinite housing. More significantly, the debate has focused solely on supply, neglecting demand. The simple fact is that we cannot address housing without tackling the Irish Government's open door policy towards the purchase of residential property. It often seems like anyone from anywhere in the world is welcome to buy any amount of residential property here. This policy, or lack of it, applies to both individuals and, more often, to foreign corporations. Members of the House, in what other nation would it be acceptable for the biggest landlord to be a Canadian vulture fund? Given that members of our governing parties are often landlords themselves, and some have invested in vulture and cuckoo funds, it is hard to imagine this isn't by design. However, foreign vulture funds and property speculators are not the only pressures on housing. We must also consider migration. Increasing housing demand without expecting stable rents is unrealistic. No state policy or housing market can keep pace with the mass immigration we've seen in the past 20 years. Many migrants in Ireland are employed by large multinationals at much higher wages than the rest of the population. Consequently, we see numerous examples of newly built housing estates in areas like Lucan and City West, where as few as 9% of residents and owners are Irish. It is time we introduce new laws to restrict the purchase and ownership of residential property by both foreign corporations and non-EU nationals. Many countries have similar restrictions, such as Denmark, Switzerland, Canada and Hungary. In our own country, we already allow restrictions in the Gaeltacht areas. We have precedents and best practice to draw on, and it is of utmost importance that the Government, especially the Minister for Housing, looks into this. Thank you.
You know, so many points were raised. Vulture funds run by foreign corporations swooping in, picking up properties, becoming mass landlords. You have multinationals who are bringing in migrants on much higher wages than Irish people are being paid, to the extent that some areas, and she named two at least, where 9% of the people buying properties there, 9% are Irish, 91%. Almost 9 out of every 10 houses that are being sold or people moving into certain areas are foreign. The government's talking about supplying houses. It's not addressing what's causing the huge demand for houses. It's just talk. And this is a problem that's getting worse year on year. And it doesn't help as well that many of the government ministers are also landlords themselves. They're buying up, they're getting a piece of the action. The amount of money that's being spent on iPass centres and hotels being taken over to house migrants asylum seekers, so-called asylum seekers, so-called refugees, fleeing all the way to Ireland, skipping over all the European countries, skipping over all the African countries, skipping over all the Middle Eastern countries to get their way to Ireland. If Ireland didn't have the benefits structure that it had, if Ireland didn't have the red carpet rolled out, the financial red carpet, no one would be coming near the place. But it does. So what does that translate into? This was a report that was published yesterday, or some figures that were published yesterday. The number of people homeless and living in emergency accommodation has climbed to another record high and stands at 15,378 as per last month. And I'll get to the figures that aren't included in this. This is just the headline figures. These are just the figures that are being told to the public, which even if this was the top figure, this would be horrendous enough as it is, but the real numbers are actually higher than that. The figures relate to February and include 4,653 children who are homeless, an increase of 50 in comparison to last month, and also a record high numbers of homelessness, period, and record numbers of children who are deemed to be homeless, and it amounts to over 4,500. Can you picture 4,500 Irish children standing, say, in a field, standing in a town square, wherever? Can you picture 4,500 kids, Irish kids, and then looking at those 4,500 kids and thinking every single one of them is without a home? Focus Ireland said that if this had happened in the past, it would be headline news. I think the problem is that people are becoming desensitized to it. It doesn't have the punch and the impact that it once had. And a headline like this, because every month that goes by, it's record high, record high, record high, record high. And people are like, oh, it's another record high. Yes, there's 4,500 kids homeless. There was 50 more than last month. That's still 50 more kids without a home this month on month. And I'm sure it'll be worse again next month. Data published by the Department of Housing shows an increase of 92 people accessing emergency accommodation compared to January. Year on year, a rise of 11.1%. That's double digit numbers of Irish people accessing homeless services, emergency services in a year, an extra 1,500 people. The Executive Director of the Simon Communities of Ireland has said the figures show a grim situation. So it's not just me being dramatic when I say it's not a crisis, it's a disaster. This is someone who's dealing with homelessness on a daily basis and probably has access, or definitely has access, to better figures and statistics than I do. Said this is a grim situation and the time for change is long overdue. But still, the problem compounds. There's a glaring disconnect within the government regarding housing, homelessness and prevention strategies, said Bear Grogan. And if this graph doesn't highlight it or sober you up to the reality of this, then nothing will. This is over a 10-year period. So this is from 2015 up until this year, 2025. Number of individuals per month who have used homelessness services. So back in January 2015, it was the total amount was under 5,000. Under 5,000. And now the total is sitting at 15,300. So more than triple. This problem has more than tripled over the last 10 years. And in every category, total amounts, the amount of adults, the amount of children has been going up and up and up. And the most sobering thing is if you look at the amount of children that were accessing this, actually, if you go back to 2015, you look at the line at the bottom of that graph, it's probably around about 1,000 kids in 2015, January 2015, roughly 1,000. Now we're looking at 4,300. So the children accessing homelessness services has quadrupled in the last 10 years. Lack of action is directly impacting the increasing homelessness figures. So, again, like I say, with everything, the blame for all of this, all the woes, the blame should be traced squarely back to the Irish government. They are to blame. They should be held up accountable. They should be tried for this gross neglect, gross incompetence, treachery. The numbers are rising month on month. We see families, children and young adults struggling to find safe and stable housing. There are now 10,948 in emergency accommodation in the capital, in Dublin alone, which Dublin Simon community has described as a staggering 8% year-on-year increase. Like Dublin, 8% increase just in 1 year. 1,520 families, 3,500 children living in emergency accommodation. And listen, this is the most important part. Or not the most important part, but this is a significant part that hasn't been factored into these numbers. The figure does not include or does not account for those who are sleeping rough, refugees, in inverted commas, asylum seekers, in inverted commas, individuals in domestic violence shelters, or those in hidden homelessness, such as people sleeping in cars, people sleeping on couches, or unsuitable living conditions. Overall, 2,185 families are living in emergency accommodation nationwide. That's a lot of families. I can't even begin to imagine the stress that would be, living in emergency accommodation, maybe in an area that's not close to family, in accommodation, shared bathrooms, shared kitchens with who knows who, cramped accommodation, restrictions on what you can and can't do, what you can and can't have in your living accommodation, whether or not you're working or not, you're having to try and find a job. Stress must be serious. And over 2,000 families are in that position today. Opposition parties have called on the government to clarify how high it will allow homelessness numbers to go. That's the thing. Where is the accountability? Why not say, well, if you don't address this, if these numbers don't start coming down month on month, you don't get paid. You don't get paid. You don't get expenses. And within 6 months, if they're not significantly reduced, you'll be tried for crimes against humanity because of your lack of care, your lack of action, your lack of attention. What will it take? Or how high will the figures have to go? Will I be making another video in this next month and the next month and the next month, this time next year, saying, well, actually, they're 20,000 now. The amount of kids is 7,000. It doesn't look like it's going the right way because nothing's being done. So what do you think about this? How high will the figures have to go before something's done, or what can be done to hold this government to account? Leave your thoughts, comments, opinions and suggestions below. Share the content, like the content. If you like it, give it a thumbs down if you want. Doesn't matter, because believe it or not, all interactions help the algorithm. So even if you pour hatred into the comments, YouTube likes that algorithm. If you give it a thumbs down, you're interacting. So even the haters out there, when you interact with these videos, you're helping to push them to more and more people. So fill your boots. But for now, I'm Rick Munn, No Risk, No Reward Media, over and out.